So my session today is all about fintech and how we can manage, how that's going to help people manage their own money. A couple of things I should probably confess before we go any further. The first is that I've not actually timed my session, so I've got no idea when that's going to finish. And the other thing is that my job is an analyst, so I basically spend all my time in data and trends, and I absolutely love graphs. So they're packed full in this slide deck, which is pretty dangerous because next up's dinner and we could end up being delayed. But I'll try not for us to be in that position. So what I'm going to speak to you about today then, so we've got three areas. The first, I'll look at why we even bother helping people with their money. What's the benefit of helping people manage their money? I'll look at how tech innovation has taken place already. So we've kind of got several phases, but the phases we've already gone through, what's happening at the moment and where we might go next. And then I'll give you some examples of how it can work. So where you do actually engage people, where you do use tech, what's the benefit? Can you get people managing their own money? So if we come on to that first of those, I guess the answer to that question, why do we even engage people, is because the position for your staff is pretty bleak. Okay? So if we look to start with resilience, in the last 10 years, on half of the occasions, inflation has outpaced wage growth. So this is a big problem. People have stretched pay packets within your workforce. They're carrying too much unsecured consumer debt, and 37% of people have less than £1,000 in cash. Now, if I give you an example, that good, sound financial planning means that normally you'd have somewhere between 3 and 6 months worth of cash to kind of guard against a financial shock. You can see that there's lots of people out there who are really insufficiently saving and are very vulnerable to a shock there. If we look at financial well-being, I should imagine this is something that's a hot topic for most of you in the room. Work by the CIPD last year found that 1 in 4 employees was suffering at work because of the stresses brought on by their finances. If we bring that around to look at pension, I think we all probably know that auto-enrolment isn't enough for people to be saving. In fact, an average earner, if they start at 22 and finish at 68, will only have half of their salary when they come to retirement, of which 60% is provided by the state. So, and that doesn't even account for the fact that some people may retire earlier, some people may have career breaks. So clearly there's an issue there. And one of the things that I think is most shocking about this is 3 out of 10 people don't even think their pension is invested in the stock market. There is a chronic misunderstanding of how people's pension money is being managed. Final thing is just to touch on cash, which is basically that it's a bit of a car crash. No one switches their current account, not necessarily an issue because people are used to manage their money in one place, but people who are actually have savings account rarely switch their account either. So we're in this position where, generally speaking, people's ability to manage their money isn't very good. But there is cause for optimism here. So this is work that we did. Sorry, I told you there was graphs to come. So this is work that we did last year, where we surveyed 1,000 people, nationally representative sample. And what we did was we analysed their actual knowledge versus their perception of their knowledge. And you can see across all of these groups, so young professionals, peak savers, approaching retirement, those people who are in the process of retiring, and those who retired, every one of those groups, their actual knowledge was greater than their perception of their knowledge. And so what this shows us is that actually there's a lack of confidence. People can do more than they think they do, they just don't think they can. The same piece of work that we did again last year we also looked at the appetite people have to spend time on their finances. So I appreciate this is probably very blurry for those at the back. Basically what we've got is the proportion of these respondents and the amount of time they were prepared to spend on their finances. So on this side, on that far end, we've got the least amount of time. So that's the answer there is none. I'm not willing to spend any time on my finances at all. Ranging all the way through to this end, where I'm prepared to spend some time on my finances each day. So what you can see is we've got all the shift is over here. So people do have that appetite to spend time managing their money. It's just not very easy for them to do so. And the final reason for optimism around here is that ISAs are very commonplace. So whilst bemoaning the fact that people potentially don't take enough interest in their finances or aren't getting to grips with it at the moment. 46% of people have an ISA, of which 29% have a stocks and shares ISA, and we have the lifetime ISA, which has, from a standing start, is growing because of the appetite for people to get on the housing ladder and to get some free money from the government to help them to do that. So we have this situation where we've got people who aren't really getting to grips with their finances at the moment, but there are reasons to be excited about that. So let's move on to look at then tech innovation. If we start with online access, so I mean clearly online has grown in the last sort of 20 odd years. I think the key thing to look at here is this chart. So this is data from the ONS, which just shows, it asks people of various age groups how they access the internet in the last 3 months. And you can see across every age group, this dark blue bar is that they've accessed by a mobile phone or smartphone, compared to the green bar, which is a desktop computer. So going back to the last session where we said not to come, to put people in a box and say, well, you won't do it. Actually, every group there spends more time accessing the internet via their mobile phone than they do from their desktop. So if you're offering financial help in the workplace and aren't using mobile, you're probably going to be missing out on helping people. I want to come on to some of these phases that I talked about. So the first phase has kind of already happened, and this is the growth of what we call platform technology and managing money. So if we go back to the beginning of the millennium, if you wanted to buy investments, you did that directly with each individual company. So you had quite a scattered landscape. You might have an ISA over here, a pension here, another one here, all over the place. And then what came about was these platforms that came about. Hargreaves Lansdown were one of the first companies to bring those into play. And what that allowed you to do is to have all of your money in one place so that you have one login and you manage all of your investments from one place, be that pension, ISA, investment. And that went from a standing start back around the turn of the millennium. And you can see, I mean, I've only charted here from 2008, but up to 2017, we've now got £700 billion worth of assets on those platforms. And that is really now the way that people manage their investments. The reason that's the case is because it's easier for them to do. They want the ability to see everything in one place because it makes it easier for them to do so. The second phase then of this is to look at where we are at the moment. So in January of this year, we had open banking come to fruition. And we had banks having to start sharing their data. And I think probably it's fair to say that to start with, that seems to be a bit more of a whimper than a bang that's come in with. There are very few apps out there, although the ones that are out there are quite interesting and they're slightly addictive. If anyone's downloaded the app Yolt, I can highly recommend that because it basically makes you manage your money and almost addictively makes you trim your costs of what you're spending. But actually, I think we're probably at the start of quite a big boom here because when I put these slides together, so in early November, there were 75 open banking licenses granted, but only 22 of those are from banks. So what you've got here is fintechs who are going to be creating their apps, allowing people to get this banking data and help people manage their money, trim costs a little bit better. But that only exists in the cash space at the moment, and I think that's probably where we will see greater innovation moving forward. So one of the key things, if you think open banking allows me to bring my data from all my different bank accounts and my credit card to make sure that I'm not overspending or I can manage my money a bit better, what we may have next step is open pensions. So think about that you've got pensions dotted around all over the place. Imagine having the same thing as with open banking. I click on one app and I can bring in data from all of my pension scheme in one place. This is a really big innovation because actually loads of people lose their pension plans. They change employer, they don't remember to update them with their address, and that money just sits lying dormant, not working for them. So actually the ability to see everything in one place is going to be really powerful for individuals. And this isn't necessarily a dream or a wish list because the government are really behind this. In fact, in the budget, they actually announced that there was some money that they'd put towards helping the industry sort of move forward with that. And critically, they committed to allowing state pension data to be shared, which was kind of up in the air. So expect this probably to develop heavily in the next year, and it may be that within sort of 2, 3, 4 years' time, we start to see open pensions as well as open banking. And then I've got phase 4 on here, which I we sort of term within Hargreaves Lansdown as open wealth, and that's where potentially, as well as your cash and your pensions information, it might be that you can bring in all data of all your other investments as well, perhaps your mortgages, and have that all in one place. Now, all of a sudden, technology allows people to completely transform the way they manage their money, because actually I can access this through an app, I can look at this information, I see everything in one place, and all of a sudden my finances become a bit more real. If I'm checking just, for example, my bank account, I've also got the ability to see what my pension is at the same time. And I'll just touch on one other aspect here. So one of the advantages you may have of this data sharing is that the cost of advice becomes a lot lower. So at the moment you have this, there was debate raging in the industry, started about 3 years ago, of advice is too expensive, let's automate it, let's do it online, so hence the term robo-advice. And basically you don't deal with a human being, but you plug in all your information and you get a personal recommendation off the back of it. Okay? I think in reality, what you've seen is some of those early adopters starting to move away from that. The main reason is because people want a personalised recommendation. And indeed, the job of a financial advisor is to help you understand the things that you don't actually know. How will I commit monies to saving for a child's wedding? Will I look to downsize my house in retirement? Those kind of questions, which are very, very, very hard to capture just on an online journey. So I don't necessarily think this will free up for robo-advice, but I think what you'll find is that advice for your members of staff will become cheaper if we get these developments of data sharing moving forward. I'll just come on to show you some stuff. There we go. So this is our experience then of how it works. So just to give you a bit of background, Hargreaves Lansdown, we have 3 different ways that we help clients to be more confident savers and investors. So the first way is that we provide information so that people come to us to make their own judgment. So we basically help them if they're already inclined to invest. We have a separate service which then people can pay to get advice from Hargreaves Lansdown. So if they're not prepared to do it themselves, we can provide them a personal recommendation. And the third route, which is probably more relevant for people in the room, is we also offer workplace savings as well. So the employer chooses Hargreaves Lansdown, and then we have a relationship with the individuals because of that. And this is what I'm going to talk about more today, of our experience of how you can help that group. So I think in general, we tend to think of having 3 different types of people within a workforce. So you will have a group that are already engaged, whatever happens. They'll be the people, you probably know who they are, they're the people who email you about the workplace pension, they're the ones with all the questions already. So you already have those in the workforce. At the other end, you'll have the people who won't engage, so it doesn't really matter what you do, they probably won't be that interested. And then you've got a group in the middle who I would term the engageable ones. So they're the ones that if you do provide the right help at the right times, using the right tools, so technology, online, however you do that, you can get them interested in managing their own money and their finances. So what we'll do, I'll just show you then how we measure engagement then within the workplace environment. So we've basically built a system by measuring engagement, looking at 7 different indicators. Okay, so I'll read these out. So we basically look at people who are whether someone's contributing more than they have to through their employer, if they choose their own investments, if they transfer in a pension, if they're saving alongside in an ISA or a LISA, if they've got online access, if they've got online access, have they logged in the last 12 months, and have they put in place a death nomination should they pass away. If anyone's done one of these things, we consider that they've engaged with their pension, and that allows us to realise that 76% of our members are engaged in some way. And it's important for us that we measure the actual outcome. So it's not just has someone viewed an email, has someone been on the website. We want them to have actually gone and taken action, and that's what we're analysing. But what this actually does, it allows us to look then in depth and say, okay, how many people, we know the proportion of people doing each of these things, but how engaged are each individual member? How many people are doing nothing whatsoever? How many people have ticked all 7 of those boxes? And so apologies, I've put up a bit of a stripy mess on the screen now. What this is basically showing us is the proportion of people who are engaged. Now I've got here, so just to walk you through this, The dark blue is that they're not engaged at all, so they had a 0 score. They've not engaged at all with their workplace pension. Okay? We've then got slightly engaged, well engaged, and then super engaged. So you can see what we've plotted along the bottom here is the size of their pension pot. And again, I think this is really cause for optimism in terms of helping people manage their finances. What we find is that when someone has a pension pot of less than 5,000, only half of the members actually engage. So then they're not really inclined to engage when they've got a smaller pot. As soon as it gets bigger than that, they start to feel confident. It becomes real. It's an important sum of money, and all of a sudden we see the engagement levels ramp up from there. So we've identified this red line here. As soon as you get above £5,000, we call it the pension boredom threshold. That's when you start to become interested in saving for investing. Now, currently, under the first phase of auto-enrolment, it have taken 9 years for someone on average earnings to get to a pot of that size. Once auto-enrolment's fully rolled in, it's only going to take you 3 years. So you can see there's a massive difference in terms of how quickly people will start to be interested in how they manage their finances. I'll just come on to the whole tech side of things then and how that impacts. So how Hargreaves Lansdown interacts, we have an app which we launched in 2011, which I have to say, shamefully, I thought was a complete waste of time at that point. It was then revamped in 2017, and this is kind of one of the ways that we interact with people. But what I'm going to show you here then is how people, if they have online access, how their engagement compares to if they haven't got online access. So the green bars are those people who are online. The dark blue bars are those people who aren't online. So you can see that across everything, across contributions, investment choice, transfer in, saving alongside their pension, and the death benefit nomination, you have to have people online. You have to be engaging them. You have to get them to log into their account. That's how you're going to get the best outcome. And actually, here, this helps to sort of bring that to life. So this is the interaction of people with their account. When are they logging in? And what we've got here is that 56% of our logins occur via the mobile app. So again, going back to that point of when people access the internet, it's often via their mobile phone. And we've got here, the blue line here is the mobile app versus the desktop, which is the green line. And there's two things, I guess, here to pull out. The first is that the mobile app gives you all of this interaction on the far side. So people, if you're offering mobile access for people to manage their finances through the workplace, they will be doing that in their own time, in the evening, because that's important to them. The other thing to notice is that you've got a similar shape to these graphs. You've got peaks that come at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. But the mobile happens before you get to work, whereas the desktop happens as you get to work. So if you're offering mobile technology, actually people will be logging in on the commute, not when they're at the workplace. And again, that's just offering people access to manage their finances when it suits them, as opposed to when it suits you. The final thing I'll just touch on, which flies in the face of Innovation Day, because whilst we've talked about how great technology is, we also find very similar trends around face-to-face engagement. So in a push to go to a more innovative way, a more tech-based way of helping people with their finances, which is undoubtedly coming, we still need to remember that people want to deal with human beings. They want to just kick the tires. Have I understood that quite right for me? Does that make sense? The way I hear it is, the way I'm understanding that is this: am I right? That kind of conversation is really, really important. And again, you can see, so the no meeting is the dark blue, the green is where they've had a face-to-face, one-to-one meeting, not advice, just the ability to ask questions. And again, across the board, those engagement levels just go far, far higher. And I think it's important that as we push for tech, we just remember that there's human interaction needed as well. And that's me.